So I'm sitting down today with Lindsay Pepler. She's with First American Title Ranch and Coast team. Thank you, Lindsay, so much for joining me.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be fun to have you on today to explain a little bit more about what title insurance is. And let's just break it down. Let's make this very conversational, make it easy to understand. What in the world is title insurance?
I know so many people are like, I have no idea what that is when it comes to real estate, but it really is a key component to the real estate transaction. Title works hand in hand with escrow if there's a lender, buyer and seller, and really we insure the legal description of the property, and we're ensuring that ownership from one, or the transfer of ownership from one owner to the new buyer is free and clear, that title of the property is free and clear. So we want to make sure that there's no liens on the property or encumbrances that might affect the buyer's ownership rights at the end of the day.
And now if there is something that comes up, like you mentioned, a lien, maybe an encroachment, maybe an easement, how do you navigate that? What does that mean?
Yeah, so like if we know that an owner is going to sell their property, we always encourage, you as their realtor to pre-open title so that we start to do our job in researching the chain of title, what we're showing on public record. We issue what's called a preliminary title report, and in there is going to be all sorts of things. We're going to show, when it comes to liens, if there's anything like a child support lien or a mechanic's lien, if there was construction done to the property and the bill wasn't paid and the contractor put a lien against the property, we'll show that. Any unpaid taxes, HOA liens, things like that. Because ultimately, when you go to transfer that property, that all needs to be clean and clear. So that's part of what escrow and title will work with when we're in contract to get all of that paid, those debts paid. And so that title is, not going to hinder this new buyer in any which way when they, take ownership of the property.
Exactly. So you basically answered my next question, which is why is title insurance so important?
Yeah.
So it's to make sure that it is free and clear for that next buyer purchasing the home. Now, what happens? Do you ever see anything that somehow gets by, that gets missed?
I mean, we're all humans here. Things get missed, but we really pride ourselves on diligently taking the time we have a whole researching department.
Yes.
That's what they're dedicated to do, to really go back and look at the transaction history and really, cross every T, dot every I when it comes to researching what's showing on title. But occasionally things will come up, and that's really where title insurance comes into play.
Yes.
That protection. If anything arose, close of escrow, the new buyer takes ownership. If something from the past comes up, you want to be protected.
Exactly.
And it's kind of interesting. A lot of people are used to like car insurance.
Yes.
Because you're paying this monthly premium for car insurance. In a case where something happens in the future, you want to be protected with that insurance policy. Whereas title, you pay a one-time fee at the close of escrow, and we can kind of talk about who pays what.
Yeah.
But that one-time fee, and then the new buyer holds that title policy for as long as they own the home. So unlike a car insurance where you're paying monthly premium, you pay that one-time fee, and then that protects you for the lifetime of you owning that home.
Okay, and that's just protecting you against anything that may come up.
Yes, from the past.
Exactly. Okay, so it's working backwards as opposed to forward. Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, you spoke on fees. Now, who is typically responsible in a real estate transaction for the title insurance fees? Is it the buyer or the seller?
Yeah, so typically, I can speak for California at least. Typically, the seller is responsible to pay for the homeowner's title policy. That's just kind of how it works, to clean and clear them of that title, transferring it to the new buyer. But sometimes you'll see if the buyer is using a loan for the property, you'll see what's called a lender's title policy. And ultimately, that's just to protect the lender if there's any title defects that might come up, because they're in that first position of ownership because they're lending on the home. So they want to make sure that they're protected in that sense. So you'll kind of see those differences depending on if they're using a loan or not.
Okay, so typically we see title insurance policies on the seller's side and then the lender's title policy on the buyer's side.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Perfect. And of course, all of this can be negotiated within the real estate contract, but that's typically what we see. Now, what do you wish more buyers or sellers understood as it pertains to title insurance?
Yeah, this is probably people's biggest investment, right? So, I mean, I feel like when you know you're going to sell a property, reach out to you, or and we can work hand in hand together to research how title is currently held. Oftentimes, people think that they have a certain percentage of ownership in the property when we go off of public record and what that grant deed says. So kind of doing your due diligence up front to really understand how title is held, who has, what interest in the property. But most importantly, if you can, and I know that you've recently went through this, is holding title in a trust.
Yes,
it's so important.
So important.
Yeah, because we hate to see it, and we see it often, where whether it's a sole owner or let's say two owners own the property and they both pass away and they don't have a trust in place. A will won't essentially work. And a lot of people think that it might, but we got to really stress the fact of having that property held in a trust so that you have that estate plan in place for who, ultimately is successor trustee, who's the beneficiaries of the property, who you want to kind of take over in the case of an unfortunate death.
Exactly.
So, highly stress
I'm
holding your property.
So glad you brought that
in
up.
a trust.
It's so important. Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that because, it's not something that's necessarily exciting to put in place. You don't look forward to
those questions are tough.
They are, and you don't want to think of all of those worst case scenarios, but it's so important because you don't want to be on the other side of it and, wish you had planned ahead of time. So anything else that you wish more people understood? Is there anything else that you think would be helpful to either home buyers or home sellers?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on too, you mentioned easements earlier.
Yes.
So when we run a title search, we'll check for any easements on the property and we plot those on a map for you to really understand as the new buyer, taking ownership of the property, where those easements lie. And that can be for things like SDG&E. And that's really granting them access on a portion of your property to, if they need to get on there for anything to fix on their end or things like that. Or a neighbor that maybe has to cross a portion of your property, or you're sharing a road together to access your property. So easements are put in place for things like that, whether it's allowing you access over a neighbor's property or vice versa. And so that's all legal, and put out there of record. Also, one thing too is we see what's called open space easement, and that might be sometimes a big portion of your property that's kind of protected agricultural, and you can't do any building on that portion of your property. So those are some things that we plot out when we open a preliminary title report, but of course really good to review, especially a new buyer taking ownership.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that wealth of knowledge with us. I so appreciate your time. Hopefully you enjoyed those tips for title insurance. Make sure to reach out if you have any other questions. Hit the subscribe button, and thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.